So the main purpose of this exercise then was to get the students to write a final report on the experiment they carried out during the course, but not to do it so much in the style of a school report, but more in the style of a scientific paper. And key to that was when they'd be writing the introduction to the report, that they wouldn't just be introducing their experiment, but actually setting it in a greater context of the field. So trying to think about what other research had been carried out, where the gaps were, and how their experiment addressed that. The methods then as well, sort of, I suppose one of the classic ways of doing it in the school report style is more to say, oh, well, you know, we set up an experiment and we added 1 litre of water to this tank, whereas in the more scientific style you're more detached from it, it's more passive, and you know, an experiment was set up and this is the procedure that was carried out is very kind of cold and calculated, and in many ways that sort of distance yourself from human error. You know, you're following a very cold and logical scientific process, and I think that's an important point to get across. And when it comes to the results then, earlier in the course we had run a similar analysis to what I wanted the students to do here on a set of data that was similar to what they would get out of the experiment, and it was just really applying a lot of the knowledge they'd learned in one of the earlier practicals to the report. And then finally, when coming to discussing that they would discuss it in the context of the wider field of research, and not just interpreting the results of the experiment, but what did they mean and how did they advance the field. So if we look at the various texts here, I suppose the first thing to say is that all the students in the class did a really nice job of producing a final report that was in the style of a scientific paper, and I was really impressed with that. But of course that still doesn't mean there wasn't some things that could be improved on. And then the first text in particular, you can see how the introduction and methods are written more in blocks of text, which is a little bit more like that school report style. It would be nice to see some figures or tables to sort of break that up and maybe set it more in the context of the wider field of research as well. When it comes to the results section, all the figures and tables are collected before the results, sort of distanced from it, and there's no real sort of integration between the two. And then also there's no exploration of the data itself to make sure that the statistics that were carried out were appropriate to the data collected in the experiment, and also no real good visualization of the results. So it would be nice to see some sort of bar plot where you could clearly see, like the classic picture tells 1,000 words. Also, when it comes to the discussion, it's maybe not as critical as it could be. The students missing out on some of the sort of interesting results in the experiment and doesn't really explore what might be causing those. But overall, it's still a very good report. The second text then is maybe a little bit of an improvement. You can see the blocks of text again in the introduction and methods section, but now there's a table showing a meta-analysis of previous papers that were carried out, and also a figure visualizing the setup of the experiment, which is really nice. So we get to see maybe in our heads what the students had actually been designing. The results themselves are more integrated with the figures. There is this time an exploration of the data, so we can see that, you know, it is appropriate to the statistics that are being used. But one thing, maybe the figures look like they've been directly cut from the statistics package that was used, and that just kind of looks a little bit more kind of report style rather than what you might find in a scientific paper. Also, some of the results are just described in the results section and with no statistics presented, so it seems more kind of qualitative than quantitative. And the discussion is very good, but again could be a little bit more critical and think more about what the results mean and how they advance the field. And finally, the third text is really, really excellent. So it's good structure and good formatting throughout. And what's really nice, I think, as well, is that they put an abstract to the report, which is really like what you might find in a scientific paper, where you kind of sum up for the reader at the outset in just maybe one paragraph the sort of the main reason for carrying out this piece of work, the key results and what they mean. There's also good use of background figures and an explanation of the biology of the organism studied within the experiment, which is really nice too. There's good visualization of the experimental tanks and the design again, and the results this time are really nice, with good use of original bar plots which were clearly drawn up by the student themselves, and a summary of all the key statistics from the analysis of variance that was carried out in the experiment. But just to show that there's no such thing as the perfect report, again, the student failed to explore the data for normality, which would have shown that the statistics that were presented were appropriate for the experiment. And finally, the discussion it's really excellent. There's good critical thinking, and the student clearly places the results in a wider context, which is exactly what we're looking for in this exercise.